From Aleph Beta, this is A Book Like No Other, generously sponsored by Shari and Nathan Lindenbaum. We ended last time with commandment number 7, thou shalt not commit adultery, and today we are going to dive into commandment number 8, thou shalt not steal. And we're going to see how it continues to line up with the Yaakov and Lavan story. Let's jump in.
Emu, we're making our headway. We're up to, what is it, number 8?
Thou shalt not steal.
Thou shalt not steal. So the commandment number 8 is do not steal. So is there a moment after Yaakov's deception of his brother, after his mother says, hey, find refuge in Lavan's house, after Lavan deceives him and he ends up marrying both Rachel now and Leah, right? Is there any moment where there is stealing in this story? Does stealing ever show up in this story? And what I'll ask you is, in particular, Emu, the language of the Ten Commandments is lo tignov. Does that word tignov ever appear in the Yaakov story? And I'll give you a hint, it does. The only time it ever appears is in the Ten Commandments, lo tignov, and one other time, and one other time only, in the Yaakov story, exactly where you would expect it. After everything we've seen, at some point after the story of Lavan duplicitously inserting Leah into the relationship between Rachel and Yaakov, right after Lo Tinaf, a story about Lavan's treachery, we have a story of Rachel's treachery to her father.
Vatignov Rachel et hatrafim.
There it is.
Rachel steals the trafim. There's tignov. I mean, tignov, the word itself, is directly here in this parak. There's a bunch, and it's not the only time, by the way. This is like stealing is all over this chapter, right? This is the most perfect match. Vatignov Rachel et hatrafim asher la'aviha. She steals these trafim, whatever they are, idols, something, of her father. And the very next words is Vayignov Yaakov et Lev Lavan.
Yeah.
Right. Yaakov steals the heart of Lavan.
Vayignov Yaakov et Lev Lavan Arami. Yaakov stole the heart of Lavan by not telling him he's leaving, by just running away in the middle of the night. Because theft is not just the possessions that you take. Deception itself is a kind of theft. Ironically, he ran away in the middle of the night because he later tells Lavan, I was worried pentigzol et manatecha mimani. I was worried that you would steal, that you would rob me of my wives, that you would never let them go, that you would think that they're your daughters and that should stay home with you. So in order to make sure that you didn't rob me of my wives, I robbed you in a certain kind of way and deceived you and never told you I was leaving, instead of just standing up, looking you in the eye and say, hey, I'm going. These wives are my wives. It's finally time for me to go. The text seems to hold him guilty for that as well. There's this double act of stealing. Emu, I'm wondering what we're supposed to make out of that. What do we see out of that moment when Rachel steals? How does that sort of shed light on how stealing works, what's wrong with stealing, what the justifications for stealing might be? And I'm wondering if I could, ask you to do something which we've done a couple times before, which is sort of put yourself into the shoes of a character. Let me ask you to put yourself into the shoes of Rachel for a moment. If you were Rachel, why in the world would you want those trafim? If you just read Genesis 31, you have no reason, you have no understanding why. Maybe she thinks they're fertility ornaments. Maybe she thinks they're gods. Maybe she we just don't. Maybe she wants to keep her father away from Avodah Zarah. There's all sorts of possibilities. But let me just ask you, if you're Rachel, put yourself into the mindset of Rachel. How are you feeling right before you steal those trafim? What just happened? What's the last thing you said before stealing those trafim?
The last thing that happens in the text is Yaakov comes to Rachel and Leah and basically says, like, hey, I think it's time to go. I think your dad is swindling me. And, we got to get out of here. And Rachel and Leah basically say, forced to choose between father and husband, they resoundingly choose husband, and they say we're actually we don't feel taken care of by dad. We feel like we're captives in his house. He sold us essentially.
Just read the words for a second. It's worth even just getting that down to the actual Hebrew. 14 and 15 in Genesis
Yeah.
31. Go ahead.
So Vatan Rachel v'Leah v'Tamar lo. Rachel and Leah together answer Yaakov and say to him, Ha'od lanu chelek v'nachala b'beit avinu? Do we even have any part and inheritance in the house of our father? Halo nochriot nechshavnu lo. Aren't we considered as total strangers? Ki mecharanu. He sold us.
What do you think they mean when they say "Halo nachriat nachshav"? He treated us like strangers, not even like daughters. Ki mecharanu, because he sold us. What are they referring to?
I mean, they're referring to the negotiations he made over that marriage.
Lavan doesn't give them anything, just uses his daughters as a way of getting more money for greater Lavan conglomerates. I got a slave out of this for 7 years.
And he enriched himself over our price, and sold each of us, doubled the sale essentially by
Yeah.
tricking you.
And the fact that he sold us makes us feel like what?
Property. Or
Property.
strangers.
Strangers. We're not daughters is family, right? He should love us. We're family. There's no family here. He's treating us like things. He's treating us just like mementos that he can sell and get rich on. We're literally strangers because he sold us. Okay. Isn't it interesting that right after Rachel and Leah expressed this resentment towards their father, that he sold us, that as Rachel leaves, she takes something of value from her father? What's she trying to do?
Even the score.
Even the score. Now,
you took from me, I'll take from you.
You take from me, I'll take from you. You stole from me. You took my marriage and literally put it into a transaction so you could get more money. You monetized me, I'll monetize you. I'll take your stuff. So there feels like there's some of that, but let's dig down a little deeper. But if that was all it was, Emu, she could have taken anything. She could have found a silver goblet and taken it. She could have found money under the mattress and taken it. She could have taken some sheep. She didn't take any of that. Instead, she took the idols, what Lavan describes as his gods. Lama ganavta et Elohai. Why did you steal my gods? Objects of worship of Lavan. Why, of all things, would she take that? What did Rachel really want when she took the Trafim? What was her real resentment?
She didn't have a father who loved her the way a father should love a daughter.
Exactly.
Actually,
what she really wants from him is father's love. She wants father's love. She's desperate for father's love. So what am I going to take? What am I going to take that is going to convince myself that I am loved? If I can't be loved, what's the next best thing I can have?
Oh, that's funny. The thing that you love.
The thing that you love. I want you to love me. But if you don't love me, the next best thing I can have is the thing that you do love. What drives a family apart more than anything else is when their parents die, the fight over the heirlooms. And why does it matter so much? Like, I know a family that literally broke apart because of a 1950s television set. Who cares? It was broken. But that's what mom loved to watch TV. And if I have the television set that mom loved,
the talisman
maybe
of
I
love.
can, right? Then if I can't have mom's love the way I wanted it, I can at least have something that she did love instead of me. It was that darn TV, I'll have that. Those darn Truffin. That's the only thing he prized.
It's like Rachel was listening to our shir, and she's like, "Yeah, my dad, he really loves those idols, and it ruined his relationship with me. And you know what? If I could take away those idols,
right? So again, it gets to that notion of the Torah deeply understanding the temptations for all of these sins. Of course, I understand why you'd want to steal. I get why anybody would want to steal. You want to steal not because you want the thing. The thing is a stand-in for love. And it's true with anything. It's like if I feel like here, you and I, we have this business relationship, not like you're my best buddy, but there's a certain kind of friendship that naturally evolves within a business relationship when two people do business with each other. And then you come and cheat me. If you come and cheat me and treat me just like the avenue by which you're going to get some dollars, then by golly, I'm going to cheat you back and I'm going to get my thing back. But really, what's my motivation for cheating you back? It's not just that I want the money. It's not just because I want my bank account balance to go up. It's not even justice that I think you cheated me, I'll cheat you. It's deeper than that. It's how could you betray me like that? How could you betray whatever relationship you have with me by doing that to you? I'm going to take, right? What? So I'm going to take something of yours that was valuable to you. And it's a certain kind of solace in a way. And I think it's in spades in a family relationship. It's in spades of what happens with Rachel and with Yaakov, but every kind of stealing has a little bit of this. How could you do this for me? I'm going to take the thing that matters to you. And along comes the Torah and says you can't do that.
What's fascinating is that each one of these we're seeing is a story of people thinking that they're going to get what they want.
You think you're going to get your father's love this way by getting the object of his love. You know what you don't realize? Lavan didn't even love his Truffim. They too were just instruments for him. They too were just ways he could get what he wants. He wanted them because he believed that they were magical talisman, that they were ways that he could do divination and stuff like that. He didn't love anything. He may have prized them, but he didn't love them.
And
So
even if he
you
did,
get
let's
right,
pretend he loved them, right? Now Rachel's walking around with Lavan's love objects. Does
right.
what she wants most
What does
is
it
to be
do for
loved.
her? Yeah,
Yeah, it actually at the end of the day, like you don't get what you want, and it's true with classic theft also. Like, there's a certain level of theft, right? Where I don't know. Let's talk about white collar crime, right? Where you're there's a Ponzi scheme or you're doing something in finance you shouldn't be doing. Usually, the motivation for that is so that you can walk around like a big shot and everybody is very impressed with who you are and how rich you are, right? It's not about the TV, it's not about the thing you buy as much as it is the status. But that whole status, right, you'll be insecure about. You know deep down the only reason you got this is because you stole it. So what you're really after is some kind of self-confidence or pride or respect from
yeah,
others, but you know that that's built on a lie, and so you're insecure the whole time, even though you have all the trappings. So you never
yeah,
get what you really want. That's pretty interesting.
yeah. It is. You can't get what you want that way.
So, just to pause and reflect here for a second. What you were saying here about Rachel and her motivations for stealing, while it certainly resonated with me, it was a bit speculative. We obviously couldn't say with 100% certainty that her motivations for stealing the Truffim was because she felt that she never got Lavan's love, and so therefore she stole that which he loved in an attempt to replace it. But regardless of whether or not we perfectly identified Rachel's motivations for the theft, what did feel very solid to me was Rabbi Fohrman's underlying point. We don't often feel empathetic towards bad guys, but by casting Rachel as the exemplar thief, that's exactly what we do feel. We're inclined to be empathetic towards Rachel. And that surprisingly teaches us to have empathy for all thieves. And that makes this command so much more relatable. It's like God is saying, I understand why you would be motivated to steal. It's coming from a deep place of pain inside of you. And ultimately, yes, even in your very sympathetic case, you still can't do it. And here I would emphasize the point I was making also, which is that even if a thief does steal something from a place of hurt, that item is never really going to fill the desire or heal the pain. You won't even get what you're looking for anyway. And what I love about this is that it takes the Ten Commandments, which can feel very obligation focused, very oppressive, and it turns the command actually into sage wisdom. Because when seeing the command this way, when thou shalt not steal expresses itself in someone trying to settle a score or take something that they feel they always deserved, the Torah isn't so much yelling at you as it is telling you, look, if you try and go about settling scores this way, you're actually never going to get what you want. So try and find a different way. Now, just before we move on to the next command, Rabbi Fohrman still had one more point that he wanted to make on thou shalt not steal and its connection to the deception story.
There is one more Batignov in the Torah, Tignov. It's not a
Is it going to
straight
be Yosef?
Batignov, and it's actually with Lavan's accusation that Yaakov has left without telling him. Vatignovoti v'lo higadatali v'shalechacha b'simcha b'shirim v'tofa kinor. That this is this moment you stole my heart. So really, that language is used both for Yaakov stealing the heart of Lavan and Rachel taking the Trafim. By the way, one interesting thing is the very next verse there is Lavan saying, "V'lo nitashtani l'nashek levanai v'libnotai." Why was it so terrible that you left without telling me? Because you didn't allow me to kiss my children and my daughters goodbye. Isn't that ironic, Emu? The sort of gap, the chasm between Lavan's self-concept of his relationship with his daughters and the daughters' own concept of their relationship with him, right?
Totally.
They look at
Totally,
him
totally.
and it's like, you didn't love us at all. And for him, he's like the most wonderful father in the world, so protective. And his daughters know the truth. And from their standpoint, it's like, no, you didn't love us at all. And so strangely, it's not even like Rachel and Leah can so much have a conversation with them. Like the conversation wouldn't go well. Like if Rachel and Leah would sit down Lavan's like, we don't really feel so loved. What would Lavan say to them?
I love you tremendously. We've been living together for so many years. I just want to kiss your kids and grandkids and my little
Right.
grandkids. Yeah.
I love you. How could you have the chutzpah to accuse me of not loving you? I can't even believe it after all I've done for you. And right, that's the way the conversation would go. There's nothing they can say to him because his self-concept is so diluted. So in the absence of that, Rachel consoles herself because there's no other way to get her father to love her. And so Rachel, in the end, makes this terrible decision to kind of tit for tat. You never loved me, and that's what you did to me. I'll take something you love. That'll be my consolation prize for the love that I never got from you. All right, Emu, that brings us to commandment number 9. Lo ta'ana b'reacha et shakar. You shall not bear false witness against your fellow. After the lo tignov, after the tit for tat when Rachel gets back at Lavan and takes his truffim, and Yaakov steals the heart of Lavan. After all of that, is there a moment of lo tana b'reacha shakar, of don't bear false witness against your fellow? And I think the key that points you there is the idea of witness. What does witness remind you of? And the Jacob story right at that point.
Yeah, there's definitely a witness in this story. This is the story ultimately of Gilead, of that rock pillar of rocks that is the witness between Lavan and between Yaakov. There's totally a witness here.
Just to give some context in the story of Gilead, here's what happens. Yaakov runs away from Lavan's house, and Lavan chases after him. When he catches up to him, they have a big fight. Before they part ways for a final time, Lavan suggests creating a covenant just to keep watch between them. So they draw a proverbial line in the sand, and they vow never to cross into each other's territory with malicious intent. And Lavan demands that Yaakov, get this, swear never to oppress his daughters by taking additional wives in his absence. Yaakov agrees to this covenant, and they set up this stone monument as a witness, and they swear in the name of God. So, again, we seem to have found our witness. But while we may have found a witness, I was kind of confused because it didn't seem like we had found a false witness. Lavan and Yaakov are making an agreement and, spoilers, they both keep their ends of the bargain. They never violate this covenant. And by the way, even if they did violate that covenant, let's say, hypothetically, Yaakov did take a new wife, I don't know, like 5 years down the line, that still wouldn't make this testimony at this moment false. False testimony, the kind that the ninth commandment is talking about, that's a very different kind of testimony than is taking place here at Gilead. At Gilead, the witness is acting like an extra authority to compel Yaakov and Lavan to stick to their deal in the future. But the ninth commandment is talking about a court case where two people are arguing about something that already happened between them. and a witness is then being called to testify about that. The false witness then is lying about what did or did not happen in the past. So that pile of stones being called a witness certainly felt like a strong indication that there was a connection here to the ninth commandment. But what that connection was still wasn't very clear. To find any hint of false testimony, we had to dig deeper, past the explicit terms of Lavan and Yaakov's covenant, to what this brit between them was really about. To do that, Rabbi Fohrman wanted to take a step back and look more closely at the argument leading up to the covenant at Gilead. And hey, along the way, maybe we'll even find more textual connections to the ninth commandment as well. Spoiler alert, we do.
And let's just kind of give the context just so we understand what's happening here. Yaakov is running away from Lavan's house. He could just say, hey, it's time for me to leave. I did what I'm doing. But instead, he absconds. And as he absconds surreptitiously, Lavan is incensed, not just that Yaakov has run away without telling him, but his truffim are gone. So these gods are gone, and he goes and he catches up to Yaakov, and he conducts this search at the behest of Yaakov. Yaakov has no idea that anyone's taken the truffim. Yaakov protests his innocence, and he undertakes this whole search. Lavan searches through everything, convinced that someone's got to have these truffim. He's right about that, but he can't find the truffim. Rachel's sitting upon them. They remain hidden from him. Now, at the moment that Lavan comes up empty-handed, Yaakov turns to him like, here you come running after me, accusing me of theft. There was no theft. I let you look through everything, and there was no theft. And he just lets Lavan have it. But interestingly, Emu, he doesn't just let Lavan have it about what in his mind is the illegitimate accusation of theft. Protests this innocence about things he wasn't even accused of. He just says, I am an innocent man, and I want to talk to you not just about this moment I left. I want to talk to you about these last couple decades, right? I was impeccably honest. I didn't take anything from you. I watched over all your sheep, even the things that you should have been obligated when a sheep was taken away by a wolf. I paid for it all. I've been 1,000% honest, and I worked for this. All the sheep that I have, I worked for them. All the wives that I have, I work for them. This is Yaakov's great defense of himself, a defense which, by the way, he was not asked to give, because Lavan never accused him of malfeasance over the last few decades. He was just about the truffim, but Yaakov has suddenly expanded the case.
I'm just keeping track of the fact that, like, we had lo tana b'reachai checker. We had that in the Ten Commandments. Don't answer somebody to be a false witness, or don't bear false witness.
Yes.
But then you pointed out here in this story that it begins with Yaakov's answer to Lavan.
Just want to point out that phrase for bearing false witness in Hebrew, it's not bearing. Like, if you want to say in Hebrew bear, how would you say it?
To bear false witness?
Yeah.
Isa?
Yeah, that's what you would say. It doesn't say that.
Yeah.
Lotana brea, you should not answer for your friend a false witness. It's like a strange thing to say. Why does the Ten Commandments use that phrase? And I think the answer might have to do with this commentary that seems to pair with the Ten Commandments, the whole extended story of Jacob. Going back, every little point is another vaya'an. It begins with Lavan's initial accusation. I understand you want to leave, but lama ganavta et Elohai? Why'd you steal my gods? Verse 31. Vaya'an Yaakov. And Yaakov answered, and he said, well, here's why. Here's why I didn't steal your gods, but you want to know why I left? I left because I thought you were going to be the stealer. You were going to steal my daughters from me. Go look through everything. I bet you won't find your gods. He goes and looks. He can't find his gods. At that point, Yaakov gets really mad. Verse 36, the beginning of Yaakov's great defensive speech, Vayichar leYaakov vayarav b'Lavan. Yaakov was angry, and he argued with Lavan. Vaya'an Yaakov vayomer, and he answered Lavan and said, Me pishi, what did I really even do that you lit out after me? Why'd you come running after me? Right? You didn't find anything. And not only did you not find anything, not only were you unjustified in looking for the truffim, but I want to tell you, you've been trying to cheat me these whole 20 years. And I would have had nothing if it weren't for God coming out of the clouds and giving me these sheep. You would have taken everything, right? So let's look at Lavan in verse 43. Go ahead.
So Vaya'an Lavan. Lavan now, he says, answering word, I can take that too.
Yeah.
Lavan answers him, and then what does he say? Oh, Vayomer al Yaakov, Habanot benotai. Wow, the daughters that you're arguing about, they're my daughters. Habanim banai, the grandkids, they all come from me. That son soni arrangement, they're all my sheep. They come from my sheep. V'chol asher ata ro'eh, everything that you see, all this stuff here, be people, whether they be property, lihu, it's really all mine. So his argument is, his raising the stakes is, okay, we're not talking about Truffim, and okay, you started talking about like the legal arrangements between our employee disputes and which property is whose. You know what, Yaakov? Everything is mine. It's all been mine this entire time, right? This is all a game. What is your schar and what's your salary? At the end of the day, this stuff is entirely mine. So Lavan, by using that word vaya'an, also widens the dispute even further.
At this point, what's Yaakov thinking to himself? What's Yaakov even going to do? Like Yaakov gave a full-throated defense of the last 20 years when he wasn't even accused. And then all of a sudden, Lavan comes and completely dismisses that defense. Yaakov has spent all this time talking about how honest he was with all of his labor, that every single thing he has is earned, from the wives that were the 7 years' labor that he was supposed to give him, to the sheep, to every last thing, only to hear Lavan with a wave of the hand dismiss it all. The wives, they're my daughters. The
Yeah.
grandkids, they came from my daughters. The sheep, it was all started from my sheep. Everything you have is illegitimate. It's all mine. At this point, if you're Yaakov, how are you feeling?
I mean, it's humiliating. He pulls out the rug from under him, but what he basically says is we almost don't even see reality the same way. We're in two different worlds.
I can't even say anything. So if we says, what's going to be the Vaya'an now? What's going to be Yaakov's answer to this? The answer is like, what can I say? I mean, there's just like nothing to say. Then Lavan comes up with an idea. I know. We're going to make a deal. We have sort of an irreconcilable dispute. Let's call a witness to kind of decide this. The witness will start with stones, but it'll end with God. Re'eh Elokim aid beinu beinecha. God's going to be a witness between you and between me. But imu, out of all of this language, comes lo ta'ana b're'acha aid shaker. Let's go back to that language and just take those three words, ta'ana b're'acha aid shaker. That word aid, that's Lavan. Re'eh Elokim aid beinu beinecha. Let God be the witness between you and me. But imu, there's ta'aneh and bere'acha also. Ta'aneh, answering. It's all about answering. That's the leitmotif, the word that over and over, each one's answering the other. And finally, Yaakov doesn't have an answer. His only answer is to say, you know what? Fine, God will be the witness between us. Who are they calling God as a witness against? The answer is their Rhea, their friend. What did Lavan say? Kinitzater ish mere'ehu. One man is going to leave his friend, and we won't see each other in the future. We need a witness. We need a witness between a man and his friend. Well, Imu, if you add that up, the aid, the ta'ana, the reya, lo ta'ana, bere'acha, aid, shaker. Do not bear false witness against your fellow. It sure sounds a lot like Lavan's language here. What do we make of that?
Yeah. I mean, that evidence is very solid, and it feels right. Uh, like this is definitely here.
Okay, so let's just take stock of what we've noticed so far. We just ended on noticing that the language of the ninth command, Lo ta'aneh b're'acha eid shaker, is pretty clearly reflected in the story of Yaakov and Lavan. We have the ta'aneh, the constant answering between the two of them. We have Rhea, the friend, in Yaakov and Lavan. And now we're back to the aid, that witnessing pile of stones. But along the journey, we had found something else that was really interesting. In this interaction between the two, they weren't just talking about the future. They weren't just going to make a covenant about not crossing a boundary with ill intent or agreeing to not take more wives. They were, in fact, digging into their pasts. And as they did, they kept widening the scope of their dispute. Lavan came and attacked Yaakov about the stolen truffim. Yaakov responds and claims that not only didn't he take the Truffim, but Lavan had been taking advantage of him for years. Lavan responds, claiming that really everything that Yaakov has belongs to him in the first place. It just keeps getting bigger and bigger in scope, but all about the past. And understanding the subtext of the dispute between Lavan and Yaakov is what would lead us to our one missing key word from the text of the ninth commandment. We had identified our witness at the beginning, that pile of stones. But now we were pretty sure we could identify how this witness's testimony was false.
It's almost as if the Ten Commandments later on is telling you, hey, this deal that went between these guys was shaker. There's falseness here.
There is. And let's talk about the falseness, right? The most obvious one guilty of that falseness is Lavan in his self-righteousness, calling God as witness to make sure that Yaakov is not going to dare oppress his daughters. If anyone was guilty of oppressing Lavan's daughters, specifically by adding a wife into a marriage, that was Lavan himself. Literally, he is trying to whitewash his past by creating this future accusation against Yaakov. And so what Lavan is doing by pressing God into service is in effect drafting God as a witness on his side in the court case, when really what Lavan is doing is trying to absolve himself of guilt of what he did in the marriage between in his own interference in the marriage of Yaakov and Rachel. And God is like, don't do that. Don't go calling me. Don't go calling a false witness. But I can understand the temptation to try to whitewash your past. And by the way, if you think about disputes between people, how many times has it happened that the dispute isn't really the dispute? It's not really about the future. It's about the past.
Like almost always about the past.
That's right. And it's about your own past and your own vulnerabilities in the past that you're trying to hide through some kind of vindication of the
That's
future.
actually a really great point, because if you think about it, right? Imagine you're Yaakov's lawyer and you're like, oh, I'm being taken to court. He wants to create an injunction against me to say that I can't take any more wives. How dare he, right? What would the lawyer say to Yaakov? The lawyer would say, Yaakov, are you planning on taking any more wives? No. So then what's your problem here? He wants to sue you and create this, court case, and great.
Right.
There's no harm, no foul. But for Yaakov, his blood is boiling. Because what does it really mean to have an injunction about this future?
Yep.
Right? It really means that Lavan is trying to tell a story about the past. And nothing is happening badly to Yaakov, but that's what's crazy about the legal system, is the legal system seems to create realities. Like, with everything being official and public and publicized, and a judge and a jury, like all of that tells a story about what happened and what will be. And that's
Exactly.
what,
And the irony of the story is that the surface level argument of Lavan is not false, right? Lavan drafting God as a future witness that Yaakov will never do this. Sure, be my guest. Let God be the witness. No problem. There's nothing false about that. Yaakov's never going to do it anyway. Right? But the false part is the implication of innocence that Lavan is getting at by drafting God as that witness. That's what's false about all this. And God is like, don't drag me into your, into your court case about the future, which is attempting to vindicate a guilty past. That is a kind of false witness, and I want to have no part of it. Interestingly, though, Yaakov agrees to that witnessing. And in agreeing to that witnessing, in a certain way, Yaakov also trips himself up, because in agreeing to this, like, ask yourself, what exactly has Yaakov agreed to in Gilead? Is it really just about the future, or is God supposed to be there to adjudicate the whole unresolved argument between them, the unresolved argument that began with the Truffim, the idols that Yaakov never knew that Rachel had taken, that Yaakov had self-righteously protested that, let whoever take that die. And of course, there's terrible consequences.
Sorry, just interrupt. You're noticing something bilateral here, which is not what happens normally in a swearing in a court case, right? A witness testifies against you, but there is a bilateral witnessing here. Right? It's not just Lavan testifying against Yaakov. It's in some ways Yaakov testifying against Lavan, and you're sort of hunting for what? What exactly is Yaakov's testimony against Lavan.
What's in it for Yaakov is, I think, Yaakov's vindication for everything that Yaakov's been trying to say he's been innocent about. I took care of everything in your household. I was the most perfect watchman of everything. And of course, underneath all of that is this thing that he doesn't even know, which is that Rachel stole the Trafim, which is that the essential reason why Lavan actually started this witch hunt is true. There's a kernel of truth in it. The Trafim were taken, right? And unbeknownst to Yaakov, and when Yaakov agrees, it's like, yeah, let God be the witness between us. That is a part of the unresolved dispute. You can obscure it. The case became so expanded. It's a case not just about the Trafim, but the whole 20 years, about everything I've done. Lovin is, yeah, it's a case about the future too. But at the core, there is this unresolved issue that Yaakov doesn't even know that his position is false. And in bringing God in as a witness, unknowingly, Yaakov is asking, in essence, God to be a witness to testify that something is not true. Again, understandable. He thinks it's true, right? But it's like, come on, I've got this crazy guy, this Lavan guy, who's making all these crazy accusations against me. God, do me a favor, just be my witness over here. He wants you to be a witness. That's fine. Just testify to the truth. You know everything I've said is true, but he doesn't know everything he said is true. And he's gotten himself tragically tripped up in a way which Chazal will tell us will redound catastrophically. Rachel is going to die because of this. Yaakov said, whoever has these trafim is going to die. It's all the long arm of Gilead. So Lotana Breacha Eid Shaker, I think, textually is pointing a damning figure at Lavan. But Yaakov participates to bring God in as a witness to something which also isn't true. And therefore, in a way, both of them have somehow given in to this temptation to have God tell a story about them, which is not entirely true. And along comes Exodus, and it's like, look, be really careful when you adduce witnesses to a story. I understand that temptation. I understand that you think your position is completely unimpeachable. But just because you think your position is unimpeachable, you may be guilty of wild self-delusion like Lavan is, or you may just be guilty of not knowing all of the circumstances of a situation. Lo ta'ana breacha eid shaker. Be really careful about drafting someone in to be this great witness in the legal system, that you're in the absolute right. There's very little absolute rights that you can draft a witness to. Be really careful about that.
The energy that I'm getting from this paradigmatic case isn't so much like make sure to tell the truth in court. It's talking about the people themselves who are choosing to bring the case. It's actually saying, be very careful when you use the justice system, because you think you are actually saving yourself from your own Inouye. You think you're such a victim, but in your righteous indignation and your outrage, you may end up victimizing someone else. And the consequences are, the consequences are real affliction and hurting of other people.
So just to make explicit what you're saying, because I just want to make sure I understand it, you're reading the Tana there as a double entendre. In other words, Tana is a strange word. Lo Tana Breacha Eichaker doesn't really mean the way all of our translations translate, don't bear false witness. It doesn't really mean that. It's a strange word. Lo Tana can mean two things. It can mean to answer, or it can also, depending on the conjugation, mean to oppress. And both of those languages are showing up in the Genesis account, right? And that's what Exodus in the Ten Commandments seems to be picking up on. Vaya'an Lavan. Lavan is answering, and Yaakov is answering, as there's all this answering building upon each other. But what it ultimately leads to is im ta'ane, don't you dare oppress my daughters. And that language is being picked up with lo ta'ane breacha et shaka, and you're sort of reading the double entendre, right? Which is that language for bearing false witness kind of partakes of answering. Don't let this answerings get out of control to the point where you got a false witness, but also look at what those answerings out of control can end up doing with a false witness. L'im ta'ane et benotai. Lavan was like, don't you dare oppress my daughters, without realizing that there is an oppression that Lavan is perpetrating by even leveling that accusation at Yaakov. It's an oppression that brings up a whole trauma of the past where Yaakov was completely victimized by Lavan that night that he ended up marrying the woman that he never wanted to marry. It was the ultimate Inui where he was the victim of that Inui, of oppression. And Lavan is now trying to cover it up. And so that double entendre of lo ta'ana breach ha'ed shaker is that sort of divine hand being pointed at Lavan, which is like, don't self-righteously argue that Yaakov is the impious one who would oppress others. You are the oppressor, and you've done it to Areya, and you've done it with me being the aid, and I was the aid sheker. I was the aid brought in to testify to your falsehood. Don't you dare invoke my name to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually think it's a very, very elegant double entendre. Because it's connecting two words. One is the word to answer, and the other is the word to afflict. And if you pay attention maybe to the relationship between them, it's sort of like an exponential answering, right? Answer without listening is a form of victimization, a form of oppression, particularly to somebody who has been a true victim, right? Imagine that somebody is bearing false witness against you, and actually you were the one who were victimized. Now on the books, right, with the court case decided against you, what's out there is the exact opposite of what happened to you. And if you look at what happens in the story, Yaakov is left reeling. He doesn't answer. But like, can you imagine your father-in-law, who, after everything he's done to you, creates an injunction that says, hey, don't take any more wives? Yaakov has to live with that the rest of his life. And all the people and the rumoring and the whispering, they're not going to know about how Lavan did this to him. They're going to think that Yaakov guy loves wives, keeps adding wives, right?
Isn't it interesting how in the Ten Commandments, God isn't the witness, but in the Genesis story that's the prototype for the Ten Commandments, God is, right? Lo tana breach ha'ed shaker is just like, hey, don't bear a false witness against somebody. But the prototype to it is like, boy, that's really scary because guess who Mr. Witness is? Like, let's reveal that witness, and it's God. It's like God is literally being called in as a false witness. Somehow I think that in the Ten Commandments, maybe what that teaches you is that any time you call any false witness before the justice system, in a sense, you're calling God as a witness. Disputes happen all the time. They're private. The whole point of legal system is that when people can't resolve their dispute in private, the things are just too painful between them. That's when they turn to society. That's when they turn to the court system and say, hey, could you just come and just say who's right here? It would just make us feel so much better if you could say who the right one is. And society is like, all right, fine. Like, we really don't want to do this. But if you really force our hand, that's the only way we can put this behind us, then fine, we'll go do it. In a certain way, maybe the Torah is saying that court system doesn't just have society behind it. It has God behind it. To the extent that you're corrupting a God-given institution like the court, in a way, you're bringing God into something that he doesn't want to be brought into. And at some level, if you ask the court system to adjudicate between you, and you try to manipulate that system by bringing in a false witness, in a way, you're trying to manipulate God as to coming down on your side. Don't think that you're just calling Joe, your friend, as a false witness. At some level, you're calling God as a false witness. And the energy of that comes from Genesis.
Rabbi Fohrman noticed something fascinating. All of these last few commands, they had something in common.
If I think about it, think of just jump to 50,000 feet now, so to speak, language that Emu and I often use to signify like looking at the largest of pictures. Look
We
at the
invented
last
that.
three.
That's our phrase. Jumping to
Yes,
50,000
absolutely.
feet.
Look at the last three commands, Emu. Do you see the relationship between them? Lo tinov,
Uh-huh.
lo tignov,
Uh-huh.
lo ta'ana.
Yeah.
Isn't it fascinating that they all relate to exactly the same thing from three different perspectives? Who's the Torah talking to when it says lo tinov?
Lavan.
Lavan. Lavan, get out of Yaakov's
this marriage.
relationship with Rachel. What are you doing interfering with this whole thing? Lo tignov. who is guilty of tignov, vatignov Rachel et trafim? Well, why did Rachel take the trafim? What was she aiming for? It was the one object of love. And here are daughters that say, Halo kanachriot nechshavnu. We were like nothing. We were like strangers. We were just like sold. Kimacharanu. And the greatest example of that is how he pitted one of us against the other in these games, defiling our most basic relationships with you. And in the end, along comes Rachel, who, desperate almost for father's love, takes an object of his love as she leaves him. And it's like, at least I'll have this token of the love that I never had, and I'll steal that. And that's a look back upon that moment of deception that Lavan perpetrates from the perspective of Rachel. And now along comes the third in the series of commands, Lo ta'ana b'reacha eid shaker. And again, the Torah is looking straight at Lavan, which is Lavan's attempt years later to whitewash that very event, to come back and hold him and exonerate himself and hold himself completely guiltless. And God is like, don't bring me into an attempt to hold yourself guiltless for that. Right? There's real guilt there, and I will not be a party to whitewashing it.
Very cool. Very interesting to see the relationship between those.
So in a way, Emu, what we have in these last three commands is this terrible shadow that a father casts upon his relationship with children, and just this collateral damage over years that shadow brings, a kind of niyuf, a kind of adultery in a relationship, a theft that is some inadequate attempt to make things right, and then this attempt to whitewash everything and swear, and it's this attempt to kind of deal with the shrapnel from this terrible explosion in a relationship that happened 20 years before between father and child. But of course, it's not just the relationship between Lavan and his daughters. There's also shrapnel in another relationship between father and child. And that, of course, is the relationship between Yitzchak and his children, Yaakov and Esav. And I think when we get to the 10th command, if the 7th, 8th, and 9th commands are about the shrapnel and the relationship between Lavan and his daughters, the 10th command is going to come back to the haunting legacy 20 years later of a father's relationship with his children that did not go well, that left both unloved, as Rachel and Leah once felt unloved. And the question is, what then? What will they do about it? And that brings us straight to commandment number 10. Let's take a look.
Hi again. I'm guessing that many of you might be here looking to prepare for Shavuos, maybe to give a Dvar Torah at the table, and you might be wondering, hey, wait, how many more episodes are there to this thing? And I totally get it, right? I have a 32-step cheesecake to make. So if you're actually looking for something a bit shorter that's gonna help you prepare for Shavuos, guess what? AlephBeta.org has a collection of specially animated Shavuos videos for you that are only around an hour long in length. Visit AlephBeta.org and let the inspiration begin.